Welcome back, Inebri-art. This is your host, Andy, as always. And today we have, I feel like singer-songwriter. Is that like
Sure.
another musician? Shaina Hayes, who has a new song out, "Sun and Time," and that's from her upcoming album, Kindergarten Heart, which drops on February 23rd. Shayna, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, um, there's so many musicians and acts and stuff. I was not familiar with your stuff until your PR reached out, but I was listening to it and like I'm like I was trying to it was reminding me of someone I couldn't put my finger on for the longest time. And then I'm like, oh, she sounds like Fiona Apple. Like, have you ever gotten that comparison before?
Cool. Every now and then I get Laura Marling a lot.
I'm not even
Um,
sure who that is.
she's out of the UK, I believe. She's great. Yeah, the folky, sometimes indie rock realm.
Yeah.
Usually there are some buzzers in there that it reminds people of for sure.
So, when did you start working on the new album? Was this like a COVID project? I feel like most COVID projects are kind of out now, but so was this like pre-COVID stuff, post-COVID stuff?
So this is post-COVID, I guess. Like in truth, it's kind of like a lot of the content of the album, like lyrically speaking, and sort of the themes of it are pretty much a response to kind of the COVID thaw,
Hmm.
which is to say that this album got written and recorded like very quickly, not in a rush, but it just kind of poured out.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so like it's called Kindergarten Heart. It's the themes, obviously it's not universal song to song, but the overarching theme of the album was kind of meant to be looking back on earlier parts of yourself, hence the kindergarten heart, sort of to like inform the present, which for me was pretty important during the COVID thaw, meaning like as I was going back into the world, restrictions were really intense in Canada. We really were quite isolated for quite a long time. So just kind of relearning how to, lean into joy, lean into social situations, and just kind of come back because everything felt a bit askew. So I guess the idea of the album is looking back on memory, looking back on kind of earlier versions of yourself, either to help inform the present, kind of help you be in the moment, in the present to the best of your ability, or just to cherish, to look back on moments and be excited. So that's
Yeah.
the yeah.
That's really like I don't want to say perfect timing, it's more of the time, but it is that weird time where I feel like people forgot what life was like before COVID. And like I have friends that work in the restaurant industry and they're like complaining about how busy it is. I'm like, this is normal. This is how it used to be. But yeah, just I mean, people aren't as willing to go out and do things. It's a really strange time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and to kind of like reflect back on like, you know, how you wouldn't bat an eyelash about going to a music festival before, and now you're like, oh, like I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I'll get tickets last minute or something like that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
are you seeing
Yeah,
that in the music scene up there?
yeah, totally. It's just different, right? It's different economically as well. It's just like
Hmm.
people who might have at some point, especially musicians and people in the arts, again, here in Canada, were like pretty well supported, not across the board, but a lot of folks had support that they might not have even had pre-pandemic. So kind of in the immediate throes of it, and when stuff first started happening, there was a lot more money, and it's becoming clear that that's drying up, both for individuals and also grants organizations as well. We're seeing there isn't quite as much funding for the arts, but yeah, kind of as you're saying, it's a little bit tighter, but also sort of as you are saying, just socially, people got so used to not having the chance to go out, and whereas pre-pandemic it was like you didn't really have to think about it. You were like, oh, what are we going to do tonight? Whatever. Now it's there's work required to make the decision to go do
Hmm.
something that there wasn't before. And I don't think that's the case for everyone, but that's certainly the case for me. Particularly, I'm a bit more of an introverted person, and when the pandemic itself hit, I actually made my first album. So this is my
Oh,
second
really?
one that's coming. So I had a pandemic album, and it's already out and out and about, flying around. But I also, when the pandemic hit, I had sort of started writing the songs for my first album, but didn't know what was going to happen. I genuinely didn't have a music career at all. I was farming. That's what I had done. I had gone to school for agriculture. I was working for a restaurant running their gardens. And then the pandemic hit in March. I was about to hit the field for this restaurant, and restaurants had to close. And so there was
Oh,
no reason for me to keep doing this farm, but I had just, spent the winter twiddling my thumbs, like eager for this farm season to start. So I just hit the field anyway and started my own farm. So when the pandemic hit, I just kind of put my head down, hustled, started this farm, which I ran full time up until this past summer, where music had kind of kicked off. The first album happened somehow, kind of randomly, in the pandemic, in the winter when I wasn't actively farming vegetables. We put it out, and it did well, and somehow now I'm switching. But all that to say, for me, the pandemic forced me to really just work alone and lean into that introverted, lean into that like not being social. I just built this farm, I did this thing, I recorded this album. I like, quote unquote, I think like thrived in that environment and produced a lot of things, but I am now finding like I really do miss and need to be around people, and I have to relearn those muscles, even though I'm the type of person who can thrive in an introverted setting, that doesn't mean it was good for me, and I do
yeah.
still need to learn. So that's sort of where I'm at, right? It's like I in the moment of the pandemic, obviously it was difficult, but I am the type of person who pushed through and was able to do stuff and enjoy what I was doing. But yeah, we're all a little different after that. So
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. And there's quite a few people I know who are introverts, and the pandemic almost gave you more of a reason not to want to be around people, and some of them I know are kind of struggling to kind of regain that kind of social, like you said, it's like flexing muscle, like being personable and having a good conversation isn't necessarily natural. Like it does take a little bit of practice. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's interesting to go from such like an isolated thing, like farming, to then be like on stage, center of attention. Like,
Yeah.
do your friends be like find one weirder than the other? Like that's such a like complete opposite. It feels like.
Yeah, I think there are a ton of similarities, but I think you really nailed for me the big difference between the two, which is when I'm farming, nobody is watching me at all. And I still find it very creative. I
Mm-hmm.
am creating, or at least I'm facilitating it to create itself. Like it's very creative, and it's really just kind of for me, right? And the music is also for me, I suppose, but there's nobody watching. There's nobody watching when you're doing the farming, that is.
Right.
But the music, the whole point is to be watched. So that's, I love making the songs. And I am getting to a point where I'm enjoying the live performance more, but that was the big hurdle to get over. It was being like, oh yeah, people just want to watch you do stuff. Great. Guess
Yeah.
we have to, guess we got to do this. Guess we got to go be watched. So, but yeah, I'm learning how to make sure I tap into the connection of it. It's a tough thing. It's not always like easy to recognize how a performance is touching the people there, especially when it's softer music and folks might just be sitting there kind of wide-eyed, not making any indication of how it's being received. But yeah, that's another kind of contrast between the farming and the music along the same lines, is the transaction with farming, or at least the type of farming I was doing, which I should say is vegetable farming. It's like organic baskets. So people would pay a membership fee and then they would once a week receive this like basket. I'm
Oh,
sure you got a
sure.
lot
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
yeah. We have that.
Yeah.
Our good friend Farmer Dave at Plato's Harvest does that, and he like you go to the local brewery, and he uses their recycled grains or spent grains or whatever, and then he drops off your bag at the brewery, and you can go there and pick it up and grab a beer while you're there, and yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
a very cool thing.
It's super cool. Yeah, very community centered, which is like why it made so much sense to start during the pandemic. Everyone was kind of looking for connection. And so in any case, the what I was saying is the transaction of that exchange is so tangible and so obvious and in my case very, mutual. I'm very excited to give these veggies to people and they're very excited to receive them, very transparent. And then something like music where, you know, you hope it's mutual
Hmm.
and you do your best for it to be genuine and transparent, but it's so hard to recognize whether or not that's happened or to what degree it's happened. And so I guess the like, yeah, I miss the exchange being very easy to understand for me. I miss the transaction being totally clear and but again, I'm trying to lean in and try to like feel it in the moment and be as present as I can and enjoy that exchange. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that you brought up that's interesting that I never really thought about is, we talk to all sorts of musicians from every genre, and I don't really feel like their genres really exist as much as they used to. But you were saying how like like where you're kind of more folky, like where your audience will be kind of more sitting, and I think you use the term wide eyed. Is it weirder to like because a lot of times like if it's a rock, hip hop, reggae, or what, you can feed off that energy from the audience when the audience is really engaged. Is it more difficult where like no one's being like woo, that kind of like, are you missing that kind of energy?
It really depends. I mean, some folks, yeah, it depends because some folks between songs will make it very clear that they're enjoying it, and that's
Yeah,
great
yeah.
when that happens. But it's not happening during the songs, I guess. And sometimes it doesn't happen at all, and you're like, wow, this audience was very, you know, I played a show really far up north in Quebec this year, really far, quite far, near Val d'Or, which is like, yeah, it's kind of like I think an 8 hour drive from Montreal, and
Oh, okay.
it was like in a park and the sun was going down and there were a lot of people there who were like lying on like picnic blankets, I guess, and some of them fell asleep and I was like, I don't know.
Is that a compliment or an
Yeah,
insult? Yeah.
I just like wasn't quite again able to like decipher what was happening in our transaction. And so I don't want to make it sound like everything is transactional. It's more just like, the give and take of what we're doing. And
Right.
I, as much as I'm doing the music for myself and wanting to satisfy my own needs, I also want it to touch people and I want it to affect people. So when I say transaction, I don't mean them paying for
Right,
the
right, right.
music.
Yeah.
I mean, the
The
exchange.
exchange. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Hmm.
And it is, I mean, that's part of why we do this podcast is when we talk to creative people, regardless of what they're doing, there's a bunch of similarities. And one of it is like, I do it because I want to put it out there and, you know, um, have it interact with people in some way, whether it touches them or they give a response. But and then there's also that kind of opposite where you're like, I still do it for me, and even if I didn't put it out, I'd still do it because it's something I need to do. So you're kind of like that good example of like, I'm an introvert, but I'm on stage. I make my artwork, but I want people to respond to it. And I feel like that's kind of like the perfect example of like all of us creative people. Like we can love our work, but at the same time just be like, yeah, but I really don't like this about it. Like we're very fickle.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird, yeah, it's a weird thing to be doing. It's also like weird. that we're, living in a time where you do have to market yourself online and sort of like um a part of the transaction again is like some degree of intimacy. Like people expect to be able to like engage with you all the time and see what you're up to. And obviously there are like varying degrees to which artists do that, but it
Hmm.
it, it just makes being a musician not just being a musician, which can be good in some ways, but yeah, I think it's a tough thing, and each artist, especially the ones that are introverted, really has to like figure out how they're going to cater their career to their own needs with regards to that stuff. And yeah, it is important to figure out what things you like and what things you don't, and which of those things are things you can learn to like
Hmm.
and need to put in the energy to do so. And it's all a matter of perspective. Like there's um always going to be something you dislike about your job, whatever it is you're doing. And it's just a matter of, as much as possible, figuring out the balance so that your energy is the most efficiently spent, and that you're getting as much as you can from it. Because I think it's so different what each person is getting from it as an artist.
For
Yeah.
sure. And I mean, you brought up a great point where it's like, people want that intimacy and kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Genuine response, and so they're not seeing a fake act that you're putting on. They want
Mm-hmm.
you specifically, and it becomes like this. Well, how much of my life am I going to make public and put out there? And even if you are being genuine, you still are kind of, I find this very much with the podcast is it's like it's acting's not the right term, but there's a certain amount of like I've had days, today's not one, but where you're like, oh, I have to record. I don't want to talk to anybody, but then you have to hop on and be like, hey, how's it going? And
Mm-hmm.
like,
Performance. It's
yeah,
performance to some
yeah.
degree.
And I'll have my friends like that know me pretty well, and I'll be talking when they'll be like, "Ooh, you're doing your radio voice." I'm like, "I don't have a radio voice," and they're like, "You have a radio voice," and I'm like, "I don't realize that." And it is that, yeah, and it's kind of with social media. Do you feel like you're performing more, like not just on stage, but
um, sometimes, sometimes, or like if I try not to, and if I can get it to a place where I feel like I'm not, it usually takes a lot of work. Like it takes, I don't know. It's tough. I'm figuring it out. It's all so new for me. Yeah, like my first album came out in 2022. This one is coming out now. It's all just new. And so yeah, it's not too laborious, but so long as we're talking about the parts that we don't necessarily enjoy about the job, the social media admittedly is the one for me. Not a big
yeah.
fan. Yeah.
I get that. And the thing that marketing people keep telling me is that we need to do more video content. And I'm like, ugh, the last thing I want to do is talk
Hmm.
more and put my face on, you know, our Instagram. I'm so bad with Instagram. But
Yeah.
yeah, like it's just at some point you're like, oh, don't I do this enough? Like, aren't I like, no,
Hmm.
you need to do more. I'm like, ugh, and it just becomes and it's so first world problems,
Totally.
because
Yeah.
I have a really great job. I gotta admit, I do. I
Yeah.
get to talk to cool people and do fun things. Do you ever have that moment where you kind of are so in the moment that you have to kind of like remind yourself, like, oh yeah, this is my job. Like I'm working right now.
Like having so much fun that you gotta,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. Um, I think, yeah, on tour a lot of the time, though that's I tend to be the opposite, to be honest. I tend to be like um too anxious, and I'm not an anxious person, but I'm always kind of thinking about the next steps and did that sound okay, and was this that, like it's a little bit harder for me to get into the moment.
Yeah.
Um definitely I have those moments for sure, getting off stage sometimes and just feeling like we really, we're able to give a good show. Yeah, touring, seeing these cool places, just like kind of, my band are all like close friends of mine, just being like, we're just chilling. Like
Right.
we're
Yeah.
chilling. This is so great. Um, but yeah, I tend to be leaning more in the opposite direction of being like, you got to get in the moment. You got to get in the moment. This is your job, but it's also sick, and you got to like lean in. Um,
Do you have a trick to kind of, because I mean, I'll get that way. I get my business partner, it kind of jokes that he can like set his watch to my panic attacks. Because like 15 minutes before like any big event we have, I'm starting to be like, where is everybody? No one's here, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, it hasn't started yet. I'm like, I know, but someone should be here or in line or, and so I'm trying to get better about kind of like reeling that in.
mhm.
Do you have kind of like a trick to kind of like get yourself in the moment?
The thing that's coming to mind, I hope doesn't like insult anyone, but this is the thing literally that I tell myself, which is when I was farming and I would get stressed out and something was coming up and I had to do the delivery or whatever under the gun for any vegetable related reason, I would say, it's just vegetables. Like, it's just vegetables. And now when I'm about to go on stage and I'm like, uh-oh, I'm like, it's just music, man. It's just music. Like,
Yeah.
just music. You're just going to play some tunes for 2,000 people. No big deal. Like it's just music. If you fuck
Yeah.
up, it's fine. So that's my thing.
But I mean
Yeah.
that's a great mentality to have because it is, I mean, part of what makes music great is it can change your mood. And you know, I remember from my days back in, high school band, it was like, you're embouchure, you're too tight on the, you're biting too hard, and that's why you're not getting a good sound. And like there is a certain amount of like you need to be relaxed and chill to play well.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's important.
Yeah. It's tough though, when you're like deep in it. It's kind of like, that works. This it's just music works to some degree, but
Yeah.
it also
I
doesn't
like
work
it's
to a
just
certain degree.
vegetables. I'm like, I
Yeah.
think I'm gonna use that. Being like, it's just vegetables, man. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I'll just forfeit the term music. I'll just say it's just
it's just
vegetables, no
vegetables.
matter
Yeah.
what I'm up
Yeah, yeah, of
against.
course. Yeah. I mean, like, it's just vegetables. It's all gonna, it's not an
Yeah,
artichoke apocalypse. It's cool.
yeah. Um, but yeah, all that to say, like I've never quite quenched it, like I'm always still pretty nervous getting on stage, but much better than I once was. And then always, yeah, the excitement is there, and I'm just trying to be like, lean into the excitement. They feel the same. You've got the butterflies, you're a little jittery, just pretend you're excited and
Pretend you're excited and you'll get
yeah.
there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the gratitude is a big part of that. You gotta like always be as grateful as you can and kind of practice that muscle because then in those moments you're able to just be like you're about to do something that is really fun and great and you're going to be so grateful after looking back. So just like be grateful now as you're about to do it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. That kind of gratitude as far as like someone else's response to your work, that's where I struggle the most. Where they compliment me or, this means a lot to me. And my immediate knee jerk response is to kind of like play it off or like minimize it, being like, oh no, it's just not, it's not, I'm just a big dope having some fun. I'm glad you like it. Like it's so weird to me when someone like stops me and compliments anything that I'm doing because it's just, like I'm just doing it, man. Like it's not a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. Do you have that like accepting someone else's gratitude? Do you struggle with that? Because I mean,
Yeah.
with 2,000 people, there's got to be people wanting to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've got, deep Irish shame and humility. So I think like any compliments have always been a tough thing to navigate for me. But in the case of music, I kind of have an easier time. I like genuinely kind of believe that the songs often are just like an entity in and of themselves. Like I find that a really helpful viewpoint, both in writing and in moments like that, where it's like, I just feel like it's for the song, you know,
Hmm.
and we can both love, I can love a song I've written and have people also love that song and we can love it together. And that's sort of how I view it in those moments. If people are coming up and giving compliments, I'm just like, yeah, right. Isn't that song great? Like it's not even my song. Like
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, I don't know. For some reason, I don't necessarily feel like it's a compliment to me. I feel like it's a compliment to the music, and the music, you know, I've written it, but it feels like often, without sounding too flaky, I suppose it feels like oftentimes it kind of just, you're a vessel for it to be heard. And also there are so many other people involved a lot of the time in making something sound the way it does. So I
Hmm.
have never thought it to be like, oh yes, me,
That I
thank
did
you.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like very rarely do I put something out and feel like it's not something that I want to celebrate at the hands of everyone who is involved. Like I feel like everything I do is a joint piece, and I want to push it because I want everyone who was involved to feel proud of it and feel excited. Yeah, very rarely am I so precious about what I create that I would take stuff so personally, I guess. I guess it depends on the compliment. If someone's saying something very personal, then sure, I just blush and don't know how to talk. But the standard ones, the
I've
standard
literally
compliments.
told someone, "Don't put that on me," and it was meant as a compliment. I'm like, God, please don't say that. That's too much responsibility. I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you mentioned of being of Irish descent. Myself am also, and it's. I was thinking, I'm like, why is music such an important part of like Irish culture, either being from Ireland or descendant? And then I really thought about it. I'm like, wait, is it more than other people, or do we just think of Irish people, encompassing us being descendants as
Hmm.
being more musical? Because I feel like Irish music is very specific, and
Mm-hmm.
people are really passionate about it, and it's very folky. And but then I'm like, all countries have their music. I'm like, are we? Do you feel like there's music influence because you're Irish, or do you just see this just being?
I feel like it's probably not. So like I think you're right. I think like everyone's got love for their music, but I think in the I'm just riffing on this thought. We're just going. I'm just
Yeah,
thinking.
that's what we do here.
Like my feeling is that, you know, because there are so many folks of Irish descent kind of scattered all over the world,
Hmm.
as you know, that's how it happened. That's, you know, most people who identify to some degree as being Irish have never been to Ireland, you know.
Right. Yeah,
um
for sure. Yeah.
and I think there's just such a strong um uh degree of uh you feel like you're responsible to your Irish culture, which
Hmm.
maybe I can't speak for other cultures, but maybe it's not as strong. I just feel like even particularly in my case, like I grew up on the east coast of Quebec, in a region that is very, very francophone, but I grew up in a tiny community of Irish folks, and I'm like seventh generation, so it's really, and everyone still calls themselves Irish, and it's like in, you know, no one in six generations has been to Ireland. Like
Right.
I get it, but like, um, and I think, yeah, I think there's this, it's kind of instilled in you to not forget your Irish roots. And I think with that being the case, music is particularly is a strong tool for doing that. It's a strong cultural tool. And I think there's just like, yeah, I think folks of Irish descent feel a very strong responsibility to hang on to it, particularly, you know, because there were such hard times when a lot of Irish folk did come here,
Hmm.
with the, you know, the potato famine and such. It's like there was suffering. We lost a lot of Irish folks, and now you have this strong responsibility to like hang on to whatever you've got. And you know, I think with suffering comes some degree of soul, particularly with music, um and Irish music I feel probably has a bit of that suffering in it. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a tiny ingredient in the recipe is some suffering. So that's my theory on the matter. And yeah, I think also in my case, being from this like isolated Irish community within a French uh, region, a part of why that responsibility was so strong for us is because you didn't have much else to cling to. It wasn't as if we were in the rest of Canada or immersed within other English speaking communities. We really were just, we weren't Quebecois necessarily. I do consider myself to be Quebecois now, but you know, amongst the rest of the French speaking communities around you, you were like, I'm Irish. I'm
Yeah.
Irish. Here we go.
I don't know if
So
that really changes with the size being from the Boston area. I mean,
totally.
everyone here is like, I'm Irish, and the same thing, like your great grandfather's never been to Ireland, let alone you know, and but it is that kind of there's something about it where, and you know, and I'm not saying other nationalities don't have that, you know, passion. Um, but yeah, somehow it just feels more connected to music for some reason, and whether it is kind of like comes out of like the struggle and it's always been a little anti-establishmenty kind of music and you know the music of the working class and I don't you know that just seems to like resonates a lot around here and yeah so it's an interesting experience but yeah it is. I've never been to Ireland. My parents were never to Ireland, but when I do my 23 and me, it was like, you're 93% Irish. And like, yeah, I know. I get it. That is not a surprise.
Yeah, it's funny. I went to Ireland a couple of years ago. And unlike most folks where I'm from, I guess like obviously from my like viewpoint on the whole thing, just talking to you now, I have been like, listen, I'm not Irish. I don't know anything about it. I'm not gonna claim that I'm Irish. I'm not gonna do that. And I went and was immediately like really surprised at how I was there were such similarities between the culture I had grown up in and I like despite all the generations, particularly in the like rapport and in the like interactions with the folks there was
Yeah.
just this like very particular combination of being very like proper and kind of like I guess like rooted in kind of Christian morals and beliefs, like this properness and this absolute vulgarity. Like the balance of those two things was just the only pocket I've ever known growing up where I grew up. Like that did not really get diffused at all over seven
Yeah.
generations. I was just like, the jokes hit and the yeah, just the vibe was untainted, just the same. So that was really cool to see that I'm like, oh yeah, no, we're the same. The
Yeah.
accents softened surely, but it's I felt very connected to the people in a way that I genuinely went in not thinking I would. So yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And um I mean we are lucky enough where we have a lot of people who are first generation Irish around here and other than a few times being like, wait, what did you say? Yeah, it is. They feel like they. I don't want to say belong here is not the right term, but you're right. It is that kind of. They're no different, and they have that absolute vulgarity. Is kind of that. That's really funny. Yeah. Um. Do you or when you were there, were you touring, or do you have an interest in touring over there?
No, this was like a while back, before before my very recent music career started. No, I was just there with a friend,
Yeah.
just just checking it out. It was real quick. I gotta get back because it was
A quick
too
trip to
fast.
Ireland.
The quick
That's
actually,
crazy.
you know what? I was there, I was in the UK. I went to Ireland on my own afterwards, but I was actually there in the UK nannying for a band that was on tour. So I was nannying. It's my brother-in-law's band. So I had just toured kind of around the UK, and then once that job was over, I flew over to Ireland with a friend of mine, and so it was quick because I was just trying to fit it in amongst this
Yeah.
existing thing. So
Well, that
yeah,
sounds like a good gig. I
it was a
mean,
good gig.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so I'm going to ask this one question because this is also one of my favorite things about doing this podcast. And it's not one that I ever plan to ask, but I do ask it a lot. What are you listening to that I should be checking out?
Ooh, what am I listening to that you should be checking out? Um, to be honest, right now, I've been checking. I'm not in a big listening phase, but the last stuff I was listening to were kind of some albums of people within the Montreal scene that
Mm-hmm.
came out in the fall. And
The
there's
Montreal scene's crazy. We get a lot of people
yeah,
from up there, and it is all over the road.
yeah,
I love
it's
it.
I mean, we love the arts up here. There's a
Yeah.
lot of support for the arts. There's a lot of yeah, it's just vibrant. There's a lot going on and especially in Quebec, um, the public is extremely attentive. Like language aside, like the public here is really interested and curious and that helps a lot, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just the artists who are stimulating their own tiny community. There's also like from people outside the arts community a lot of interest. So that's great. So yeah, one artist from here that I love and who's kind of a friend. Her name is Helena Deland, Helenadeld. Um, Folky, beautiful. Her previous albums are a little more kind of like indie, kind of
Mm-hmm.
bedroom pop stuff, but she just put out a really stunning folk album that I've been listening to a lot. Um, yeah, that's the top of my current list. And I would have to give more thought to more, but that's it.
Oh no, I mean that's I always as long as I have one to go check out, and with yourself, then I'll have another. Um, but that's been a lot of fun, man. Like, had a good time. So now we got to do all the stuff that we're required to do. Where can people go to get Kindergarten Heart on February 23rd?
Yeah, so it's going to be available everywhere that you generally can listen to music.
All the normal streaming platforms and
Exactly.
Bandcamp. Are you gonna be on Bandcamp?
Gonna be on Bandcamp, gonna be everywhere. And there's links to everything everywhere. So you can find me on Instagram, Shaina Hayes. I'm sure you'll have the spelling somewhere for folks to see.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, yeah, if you just Google Shaina Hayes, you're gonna find it. And I have a website which is shainahayes.com. And it'll be there as well. So yeah, excited to put this one out.
Yeah. Excellent. And least favorite vegetable.
Oh gosh, no one ever asks the least favorite. What a great question. Let me give this all the thought it deserves.
Because I'll give you mine and it'll probably blow your mind.
Okay. My least favorite vegetable is going to be, oh no, this is so hard. I don't want to. Okay, it's a turnip, like rutabaga.
Okay.
Rutabaga, not turnip like Hackeri turnip, turnip like rutabaga. That's my least favorite. Which is a very, very like non-controversial answer.
No, I don't feel like I'm sure there's some lobbyist out there that's really angry right now, but mine's corn. Don't like corn. I know, right?
Friend, corn is the best. But I
Yeah,
feel you.
I,
It's
I
okay.
don't
You're
know.
not the first I've met.
I just don't dig it. Like if it's mixed into something,
Yeah.
fine, whatever. But yeah, people be like, "You want corn on corn?" Be like, "Nah, no."
Interesting. All
Yeah,
right.
I know.
I never forget when someone tells me they don't like a certain vegetable, I'll clock you for the rest of your life with that information because with the baskets, like I had to know because people
Oh,
would get
sure,
I
yeah,
mean, I didn't have to know. Like someone who's professional would be like, "That's not my concern. You're gonna have to deal with that on your end." But I was like, "Oh, so and so doesn't like onions. I can't give them onions." So I really like. I always remember when someone doesn't like a vegetable, so I
yeah.
won't forget anytime soon that you don't like corn.
Well, next time you come on, we can talk
Perfect.
corn recipes.
Perfect.
Shaina, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and we want our listeners to go check out Shaina's new album. And your song "Sun and Time" is out now.
It's
That's
out
on
now
that is on the YouTube. You can go check it out. And yeah, if you come down to Boston area on tour, let us know. We'll
for
check out
sure.
the show.
Come play some retro video games.
Heck yeah. 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 And our Plymouth area is a huge hotbed for music, so there's plenty of places around here. So
Cool, man. Thanks so much.
awesome. Yeah, thank you. And listeners, we'll catch you guys again next week. And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. So thanks again for listening.